Hey there. Today, I want to share something deeply personal, a story that encompasses love, betrayal, and ultimately, the journey to rediscovering myself. It might seem like a whirlwind, but please stick with me. There are lessons I learned that might resonate with you. Pause for a moment to invite viewers into the story. Let me take you back to a pivotal day when everything changed. Picture this: I picked up the phone, my heart racing in excitement. I was finally going to hear about my son Max's wedding plans. The initial revelation. But what awaited me was far from what I anticipated. His wife, Lena, coolly gazed into the camera and said, "Oh, we got married yesterday. We only invited special people." Let the weight of those words sink in, pausing for effect. Can you imagine? Here I was, someone who had poured all my love and resources into them for years, paid their rent, bought furniture, stocked their fridge when they'd hit a rough patch, and in one breath, I learned I didn't even make the cut to be considered special. Shaking head slowly, showcasing the disbelief. I felt like I had been snatched from reality. For a moment, I stood there, frozen in my own living room, clutching the phone like it was a lifeline. Max was avoiding my eyes as if he were a child caught in a lie while Lena lounged on the couch, smugly. That pale pink dress I had carefully hung in my closet for their wedding seemed to mock me in its silence. The emotional fallout. 7 days passed in a blur. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I resented them both, but mostly, I felt invisible. That wonderful dress, the dreams I had woven around it, now felt like shackles pulling me down. Shift the focus to the narrator's emotions. I remember tossing and turning that night, replaying the moment over and over in my mind. How could they do this to me? I went through countless sleepless nights, questioning my worth and the sacrifices I had made. The call that changed everything. Then came the call that turned everything on its head. Lena's desperation cracked through the polite facade she had worn so well. "Renata, the rent is overdue," she said shakily. "The landlord is threatening to throw us out. We need your help." The anger bubbles up. At that moment, something ignited within me. Here was the woman who had offhandedly dismissed me from her life not so long ago, asking for my support in a moment of crisis. My initial impulse was to help, but I remembered all that I had poured into them, and conversely, how little I had received in return. The turning point. With rising intensity in tone, the narrator continues. I swallowed hard and said, "Didn't I warn you that I only help special people?" The silence at the other end felt like a thick fog. For the first time, I could sense how much my words unsettled her. The camera zooms in for dramatic emphasis. In that moment, I recognized the power I held, a strength I had forgotten after years of feeling unheard. I hung up the phone and stood in front of the bathroom mirror. Paused to allow viewers to share in the profound moment. What I saw was not just a tired woman, but a warrior awakening from a long slumber. Rediscovering myself. That night marked the beginning of a new chapter for me. I cried tears of rage and realization. I had been a shadow, buried under their needs, putting mine last for too long. I watched my reflection in the mirror, realizing I hadn't just lost my son, I had lost myself. With renewed energy, the narrator speaks. I dove into my finances, taking inventory of every dollar I had sent their way, amounting to over $33,000. I had sacrificed my own dreams, stability, time, and heart while they lived comfortably and ignored my contributions. Shift tone to empowerment. But now? It was time to put me first. I reconnected with passions I had left behind, painting, journaling, gardening, rediscovering joy in the simplest of things. The confrontation. It wasn't long before they showed up uninvited at my door, armed with a lawyer. I was taken aback at first, but then I remembered my newfound resolve. Transitioning to a more assertive tone. "Take your lawyer and get out," I told them, my voice steady and unyielding. They looked shocked, but I could feel the fire inside me, growing larger with each passing moment. Strengthening my defense. I contacted a lawyer of my own. I wanted to protect not just my finances but my dignity. I was tired of being seen as a resource rather than a person. Emphasized the sense of preparation. I gathered evidence, testimonies from neighbors, and friends who had witnessed my transformation. It was time to stand firm. Facing the judge. The courtroom was intimidating but also liberating. As I sat there, listening to their claims filled with lies, I felt a surge of confidence wash over me. I had become more than a mother, I was a shield avoiding arrows aimed at my being. Looked directly at the camera, conveying sincerity. Then, I saw the judge's face as he dismantled their claims one by one, agreeing that they weren't just after money, they were trying to control me. The sweetness of validation filled the air. Reclaiming my life. In the end, when the ruling was in my favor, I felt every burden I had ever carried lift. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Pause to let the viewers digest the joy of this victory. That night, I stepped out into the world, ready to embrace life again, but this time on my terms. I traveled, found myself in new hobbies, and invested in my happiness. The lessons learned. Through this journey, I learned that the greatest love one can give is the love for oneself. I had been playing the role of the sacrificial mother, but that's not who I am. Speak with conviction, as though sharing wisdom. It's essential to prioritize self-worth. I still love my son, that will never change. What has changed is my understanding of love. True love is never transactional. Conclusion. I hope my story resonates with you. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, know that it's never too late to reclaim your life and identity. Pause on this empowering note. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story inspiring, like and subscribe for more empowering narratives. Until next time, remember to take care of yourselves. You are special, just as you are. When I picked up the phone to ask my son Max when his wedding would be, my daughter-in-law Lena looked me right in the eye and said with a chilling smile, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Special people. I, who for 3 years had paid their monthly rent of $500, bought every piece of furniture in their house, and filled their refrigerator when they had nothing to eat. I was not a special person. I stood there in the living room of my own house, holding the phone as if it weighed 1,000 pounds, watching my son avoid my gaze while Lena made herself comfortable on the sofa I had bought for them. The pale pink dress I had picked out for her wedding hung uselessly in my closet, along with the new shoes and the illusion of being part of the most important day of my only son's life. I had spent $200 on that dress, thinking about how nice I would look in Max's wedding photos in which I would never appear. For weeks, I had planned every detail. I had put money aside to give them $1,000 as a wedding gift. I had called my sister Diana in Chicago to tell her the good news. I had cleaned my house from top to bottom, thinking they might come celebrate with me after the ceremony. All of that collapsed in a second with those 4 poisoned words. Only special people. Max finally lifted his gaze and said in a rehearsed-sounding voice, "Mom, it was an intimate thing, very small, just the 2 of us and the witnesses." But I knew it was a lie. I saw the photos on social media. I saw Lena's parents proudly posing next to the bride and groom. I saw her siblings toasting with champagne. I saw Lena's white dress, which I had helped finance with the $800 I had given her last month for her personal expenses. I saw everything I wasn't supposed to see. A week later, exactly 7 days after that humiliation, Lena called me with a completely different voice. She was no longer the confident woman who had excluded me from her wedding. Now she sounded desperate, almost pleading. "Renata, the rent is overdue. The landlord is pressuring us and says, if we don't pay this week, he will kick us out. You forgot to make the transfer." Her voice trembled slightly as if the world were ending. I was silent for a few seconds, remembering all the times I had run to the bank to make that transfer. All the times I had canceled my own plans to make sure they had a roof over their heads. All the times I had eaten beans and rice so I could give them money for their desires. And now, after they had excluded me from the most important moment of their lives, they had the audacity to call me as if nothing had happened. "Lena," I said with a calm that surprised even me. "Didn't I warn you that I only help special people?" The silence on the other end of the line was so deep that I could hear my own heart beating. For the first time in years, it was not I who was trembling, but her. "Renaid, I don't understand," she stammered. "We were always special to you. You're like a second mom to me." Lies. All lies. Wrapped in that sweet voice she only used when she needed something. The same voice she had used to ask me for money for the wedding dress, for the honeymoon, for the rings, which I had helped finance without knowing I would never see the ceremony where they were exchanged. For so many years, I had this constant feeling of walking on eggshells, weighing every word, every gesture, every gift, hoping to get a crumb of affection from my own son. I was the perfect mother, the obliging mother-in-law, the silent provider who never protested when they treated me like I was invisible. But that phrase, "only special people," awakened something in me that had been dormant for far too long. I had calculated in my head how much money I had spent on them in those 3 years. Between rent, food, gifts, emergencies, and whims, it was over $20,000. $20,000 I had taken from my retirement, from my savings, from the money my late husband had left so I could live my last years in peace. And what was all that for? To be treated like a stranger on my own son's wedding day. That night after I hung up, I sat on my bed and cried. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of anger, of accumulated frustration, of years of silently endured humiliation. I cried for all the times they made me feel that my love was a burden, my presence a hindrance, my money the only thing I had to offer. I cried for the foolish mother I had been, for the woman who had lost herself, trying to be indispensable to those who considered her dispensable. When I woke up the next morning, something inside me had changed. It was not just the pain of betrayal. It was something deeper, colder. I stood up and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The same tired eyes as always, the same wrinkles that told stories of years of giving love without getting it back. But there was something else in my gaze, a hardness I didn't recognize, a determination that had been buried under years of compliance. I went to the kitchen and made coffee, as I had every morning for 40 years. But this time, I didn't think about calling Max to ask how he had slept. I didn't check my phone in anticipation of a message from him apologizing for the previous day's humiliation. For the first time in a long time, I was my own first concern of the day. I sat at the table where I had so often planned surprises for them, counted bills for their expenses, and cried silently when they treated me with indifference. Now, this table would be a witness to something completely different. I took out my checkbook, my bank statements, and started to do the math. I wanted to see in exact numbers the extent of my own foolishness. Monthly rent of $500 multiplied by 36 months was $18,000. Food and supplies approximately $200 a month was another $7,200. Birthday gifts, Christmas gifts, anniversary gifts, at least $3,000. Lena's medical emergencies, $800. The car loan they never paid me back, $2,500. The air conditioner repair in their apartment, $600. The living room furniture, $1,200. $33,400. That was the exact sum of my generosity. $33,400 I had wasted from my husband's inheritance, from my pension, from the savings I had put aside penny by penny for decades of honest work. All that money thrown out the window to keep two adults comfortable who couldn't even pretend to respect me. The phone rang and I saw Max's name on the screen. Normally, my heart would have pounded as I ran to answer, hoping he would finally apologize and explain that everything had been a misunderstanding, but this time I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Finally, it fell silent, and I continued drinking my coffee as if nothing had happened. 10 minutes later, it rang again. This time, it was Lena. I let it ring, too. Then, a text came from Max's mom, "Please answer. We need to talk." I deleted the message without replying. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I decided to go for a walk. I hadn't done that in months without a specific purpose, without an errand related to them. It was always the bank for transfers, the supermarket to buy them something they needed, the pharmacy for Lena's medications. Today, I went for a walk just because I wanted to. I walked past the park where I had often taken Max as a child. I remembered that sweet boy who hugged me tight and said I was the best mom in the world. When had he become this man who treated me like an ATM with feelings? When did I start confusing love with money? When did I start to believe I had to buy my own son's affection? At the bank, where I had so often made automatic transfers, I stopped in front of the door. The branch manager, Mr. Clean, saw me through the glass and waved. I had known him for years. He had processed every one of my transfers to Max and Lena. He had watched my account drain month after month to fill theirs. I went inside and walked directly to his office. "Mr. Klein," I told him, "I need to cancel the automatic transfers I have programmed." He looked at me surprised. For 3 years, these transfers had been as regular as the sunrise. "Are you sure, Mrs. Richter? Did something happen?" His concern was genuine, more genuine than any interest Max had shown in me in recent months. "What happened is that I finally opened my eyes," I replied. "I want to cancel everything and I also want information on how to protect my accounts. I don't want anyone else to have access to my money." While Mr. Klein processed the cancellations, my phone didn't stop ringing. Max, Lena, Max again. It was as if they had developed radar to detect when their source of income was in danger. I turned the phone off completely. "Mrs. Richter," Mr. Klein said as he handed me the papers. "I apologize for intruding, but in all these years, I have seen you be very generous with your family. I hope you are not being pressured to make these changes." His words touched me deeply. This man, who barely knew me beyond bank transactions, showed more genuine concern for my well-being than my own son. "I'm not being pressured, Mr. Klein. On the contrary, I have finally stopped pressuring myself." When I left the bank, I felt strangely light, as if I had left an enormous burden in that office. For the first time in years, my money was entirely mine. I had no financial obligations to people who saw me as a resource instead of a person. I went home and thought about all the things I hadn't done to please Max and Lena. The trips I hadn't taken to save money for them. The friends I no longer saw because I was always available for their emergencies. The hobbies I had given up because every dollar I spent on myself was $1 less for their needs. When I got home, I found 3 cars parked in front of my door. Max's, Lena's, and one I didn't recognize. I could see movement inside my house through the windows. My blood ran cold. They had keys. I had given them keys because I trusted them. Because I thought they would one day take care of me just as I had taken care of them. I took a deep breath before opening the door. It was time for the first real confrontation of my new life. I opened the door to my house and saw a scene I will never forget. Max was sitting on my sofa with his head in his hands. Lena was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, and an older man I didn't know was going through papers on my dining table. My papers, my personal documents. What is happening here? I asked in a voice that sounded louder than I expected. All three of them looked at me as if I were the intruder in my own house. Lena was the first to speak, and her voice had that desperate urgency I had already heard on the phone. Renata, thank God you're here. We need to talk. Mr. Fisher is from the law firm we consulted about your situation. My situation? The question came out of my mouth with a calm that surprised me. What situation? I'm doing perfectly fine. Max finally lifted his head and looked at me with those eyes that once belonged to an innocent child and now only reflected financial panic. Mom, we went to the bank and they told us you can lead all the transfers. Mr. Klein explained that you also blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you did that. Mr. Pfizer, a man in his 50s in a gray suit and a smile that didn't inspire confidence, approached me with an outstretched hand. Mrs. Richter, I am Dr. Pfizer, a family law attorney. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being and have asked me to assess the situation. I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I went directly to my dining table and collected all my documents that he had been reviewing without my permission. These are my private papers. You have no right to look at them without my consent. Mom, Max interjected with that condescending voice he had perfected in recent years. We're worried about you. Your behavior has been very strange lately. First, you financially cut us off without an explanation. Then, you don't answer our calls. We think you might need professional help. Lena approached and tried to take my hand with that fake tenderness she reserved for moments when she needed something. Renade, honey, we know you're under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is affecting you more than you think. At your age, episodes of confusion are normal. The word confusion echoed in my head like an alarm bell. Now I understood why they had brought the lawyer. It wasn't about helping me. It was about declaring me mentally incompetent and taking control of my finances. The same woman who had told me they only invited special people to their wedding was now treating me like a senile old lady. I am not confused, I said with a firmness that silenced everyone. I am clearer than I have been in years, and you are going to leave my house right now. Mr. Fisher interjected with that professional voice lawyers use when they want to sound reasonable. Mrs. Richter, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have a right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is impaired. They have documented several concerning behaviors. Concerning behaviors. The laugh that came from my throat was horsero, almost cruel. Like what? I suggest you do your research thoroughly before you threaten a 71-year-old woman who has managed her finances flawlessly for 40 years. Who raised her son alone after the death of her husband, who ran a household and worked honorably until retirement, and who until last week financially supported two completely capable adults. Lena stopped crying and looked at me with a coldness that finally showed her true face. This won't stay like this, Renati. We have rights and lawyers, too. Perfect, I replied. Hire all the lawyers you want. With your own money, of course, because mine is no longer available to finance your legal tantrums. The three of them walked to the door with the wounded dignity of people who are not used to being told no. Before he went out, Max turned to me one last time. Mom, this is going to end very badly for you. You're going to end up alone with no one to take care of you when you really need it. Max, I said with deep sadness, but also with crystalline clarity. I am already alone. The difference is that now it's by my own choice, not by your neglect. As I closed the door behind them, I stood in my living room, surrounded by the most beautiful silence I had heard in years. It was the silence of freedom. That night, I couldn't sleep, but not out of sadness or regret, but out of adrenaline from having reclaimed control of my own life. I lay awake in bed, planning my next steps like a general preparing for a battle. If Max and Lena wanted to fight, I would give them a war. But it would be a war I would fight with intelligence, not with emotion. At 6 o'clock in the morning, I was already dressed and ready to go. My first stop was the office of attorney, Mr. Weber, a man I had met years ago when I was handling my husband's will. Unlike Mr. Pfizer, whom Max and Lena had brought, Mr. Weber had an impeccable reputation and specialized in protecting the rights of the elderly. Mrs. Artur. He told me as I explained the situation, what your children tried to do yesterday is more common than you think. It's called elder financial abuse, and it's a federal crime. The fact that they entered your house without permission and reviewed your private documents also constitutes a violation. His words both calmed and worried me. They calmed me because they confirmed I wasn't crazy, that what had happened was truly abusive. They worried me because I realized the situation was more serious than I had thought. We have to document everything, Mr. Weber continued. Every transfer, every gift, every time they pressured you for money. We will also change your will to protect your assets from future manipulation attempts. We spent 3 hours reviewing my financial records. Mr. Weber whistled when he saw the total sum, $33,400 in 3 years. Mrs. Richter, with this money, you could have lived comfortably, traveled, and enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you completely financed the lives of 2 adults who didn't even respect you enough to invite you to their wedding. For 3 years, you have treated me like an ATM with feelings. You used me. You ignored me. You humiliated me. And finally, you insulted me in the worst possible way. Now that the money is running out, you suddenly discover you love me. Renote, please. I cut her off. There is no please. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough to be at your wedding. Now I'm making mine. I hung up and turned the phone off completely. I didn't want any more interruptions on my day of liberation. That afternoon, I went to the beauty salon I hadn't been to in over a year. I always canceled my appointments because Max or Lena needed something urgent or because the money I had set aside for myself became an emergency for them. Mrs. Richter, my favorite hairstylist, Cynthia called out. What a surprise. I thought you had forgotten us. I didn't forget you, Cynthia. I just forgot that I also deserve to be pampered. I treated myself to the full treatment. Cut, color, manicure, pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without feeling guilty. While Cynthia worked on my hair, she told me about her life, her children, her dreams. It was refreshing to have a conversation that didn't revolve around Max and Lena's needs. You look beautiful, Mrs. Richter, she said when she was done. But more than that, you look free. Did something good happen? Yes, Cynthia. I finally learned to say no. When I got home that afternoon, there was a car in front of my door that I didn't recognize. My heart raced for a moment, thinking Max and Lena might have come back with reinforcements, but as I got closer, I saw an older woman sitting on the steps of my porch. Mrs. Richter, she asked as I got out of the car. The irony was not lost on me. I was installing a security system to protect myself from my own son, but it didn't hurt as much as it used to. It was simply a practical measure to maintain my newfound peace. While they were working, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. Call my sister Diana in Chicago. We had lost touch because every time we talked, I would tell her about Max and Lena's successes, about how much money I had spent on them, about how proud I was to be able to help them. I now realized that our conversations had become financial reports disguised as family news. "Renee," Diana answered, surprised. "Sister, how are you? We haven't spoken in months." "I'm good, Diana. Better than good. I'm calling you to tell you that I've finally come to my senses." I told her the whole story from the beginning. The secret wedding, the humiliation, the visit with the lawyer, my decision to cut off the funding. Diana listened to me in silence. And when I was done, her answer surprised me. "Renee, sister, it was about time. Every time we spoke, it broke my heart to hear you brag about how much money you gave them, as if love could be measured in dollars. I wanted to tell you something, but I didn't know how." "What did you want to tell me?" "That Max never spoke lovingly about you when I saw him at family gatherings. It was always my mom helped me with this or my mom bought me that, but never, I miss my mom or I love my mom. It was as if you were a service provider, not a person." Her words hurt, but it was a necessary pain. Like when a doctor cleans an infected wound, it hurts, but it's part of the healing. "You know what else I noticed?" Diana continued, "Lena always spoke about you in the future tense. When Renata is no longer here, we can remodel her house, or when we inherit, we will invest in the business. As if they were waiting for you to die to really live." This revelation hit me like a bucket of ice water. They didn't just see me as an ATM. They saw me as a temporary obstacle between them and their money. While I was trying to make them happy, they were planning their future without me. After talking with Diana, I sat in my kitchen processing all this information. Years of marriage to a man who truly loved me, 35 years of raising my son alone after my husband's death, and 3 years of financing 2 adults who saw me as a $100,000 obstacle. The doorbell rang and on the new cameras I saw it was Elelainer with a mug in her hands. I opened the door and she handed me a fresh brewed coffee. "I thought you might need some company after everything you told me yesterday," she said with that sincere smile I had already come to appreciate. We sat in my living room and Eleanor told me more details from her own experience. "My daughter said the exact same thing to me that Lena says to you. You're like a second mom to me. We're special to you. Everything will be ours one day anyway." Those are rehearsed phrases, Mrs. Richter. They learned them from the Emotional Manipulation Handbook. "Do you think such a handbook exists?" I asked half jokingly. "Not officially, but it seems everyone reads from the same book. Chapter 1 is make her feel indispensable. Chapter 2 is create constant financial emergencies. Chapter 3 is when she resists, question her mental health." We laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. It was both funny and tragic to recognize such predictable patterns in our own children's behavior. "Did you ever feel guilty for cutting off the money?" I asked Eleanor. My heart raced, but this time, I was prepared. The cameras showed me that it was Max, Lena, and 2 other people I didn't recognize. Everyone seemed agitated, talking to each other and pointing at my house. I didn't get out of the car. Instead, I called Mr. Weber, my lawyer. "Mr. Weber, they are at my house again. This time, they've brought more people. What should I do?" "Don't get out of the car, Mrs. Richter. I'll be there right away, and I'll call the police." After our conversation yesterday, I requested a temporary restraining order. "They are not allowed to be on your property." Minutes later, Mr. Weber and 2 police patrol cars arrived. I watched the officers talk to Max and Lena. Saw my son gesticulate angrily. Saw Lena crying again, but this time her tears did not move me. One of the officers approached my car. "Ma'am, you can get out safely. Your visitors are going to leave immediately." As I got out of the car, Max shouted at me from the street. "Mom, this is ridiculous. We're your family. You can't call the police on your own son." "Max," I replied with a calm that surprised even me. "Family doesn't threaten lawsuits for mental incompetence. Family doesn't break into people's homes without permission. Family doesn't treat their mothers like ATMs." Lena screamed from across the street. "You're going to pay us everything you owe us. We have bills you co-signed for. You can't just abandon us like this." Mr. Weber interjected. "Mrs. Brooks, any future communication must be through my office, and I suggest you consult with an attorney before making collection threats because my client has full documentation of all the payments she voluntarily made for 3 years." I watched them drive away in their cars, defeated, but not giving up. I knew this wasn't over, but for the first time in this situation, I felt confident. I had professional help. I had emotional support from Eleanor. And more importantly, I had mental clarity about what was right and what was wrong. That night, Eleanor invited me to her house for dinner. I met her daughter who was visiting, and I was able to see with my own eyes what a healthy family relationship looked like. They spoke respectfully to each other, asked sincerely about each other's lives, and laughed together. The daughter didn't ask for money once the entire evening. I wanted that with Max, too, I confessed to Eleanor after her daughter had left. "And maybe you'll get it one day," she replied. "But first, he has to learn that you are a person who deserves respect, not just a source of income." For the first time in weeks, I went to bed feeling hopeful about the future. The next few days were strangely peaceful. The surveillance cameras showed me that Max and Lena were driving past my house several times a day, sometimes slowly, sometimes they parked for a few minutes, but without getting out. It was as if they were studying my routine, looking for the perfect moment for their next move. Mr. Weber had advised me to document every one of these visits, so I kept a detailed log with the date and time. "Their persistence will work in our favor," he had said. "Every time they show up after we've told them not to approach, it strengthens our case for a permanent restraining order." On Friday morning, I was calmly having breakfast when the doorbell rang. Mr. Summer from the hardware store testified about my mental competence and explained that my decisions to cancel automatic transfers were completely rational and had been processed correctly. Eleanor and my friends from the garden club testified about my clarity, my newfound vitality, and my ability to maintain healthy social relationships. Finally, it was my turn to testify. I stood up with dignity and walked to the witness stand, feeling the weight of 71 years of experience, of wisdom gained through pain, of strength discovered in adversity. Mr. Weber guided me through my testimony, letting me tell my whole story. The $33,400 spent in 3 years. The humiliation of being excluded from the wedding, the constant emotional manipulation, the violation of my privacy, the legal threats. "Mrs. Richter," Mr. Weber finally asked, "why did you decide to stop financial support for your son and daughter-in-law?" "Because I finally understood that what I was getting from them was not love," I replied in a clear, loud voice. "It was a commercial transaction disguised as a family relationship. My money was welcome, but I as a person was not." "Do you regret your decision?" "I only regret that it took me so long to make it." Max's lawyer tried to make me appear confused during his cross-examination, but I answered every one of his questions with clarity and precision. When he tried to imply that my new friendships had manipulated me, I explained to him that for the first time in years, I had relationships based on mutual respect and not on financial interest. In his closing argument, Max's lawyer insisted that I was a victim of external manipulation. Mr. Weber's rebuttal was devastating. "Your Honor, what we have seen here is not the case of an incompetent old woman, but that of a woman who has finally found the strength to free herself from years of financial and emotional abuse. The plaintiffs have presented no real medical evidence of mental incompetence. What they have presented is frustration because their source of income has decided to exercise her legal and moral right to protect her own resources. Judge Miller retired to deliberate for 2 hours that felt like 2 years. When he came back, his expression was serious but clear. After reviewing all the evidence presented, he began, "It is obvious to this court that Mrs. Renee Richter is in full possession of her mental faculties. Professional psychiatric evaluations confirm her cognitive competence. Her financial decisions, as painful as they may be for her family, are completely rational and within her rights." My heart began to beat faster. Furthermore, the judge continued, "The evidence suggests that this lawsuit is motivated by financial interest rather than by genuine concern for Mrs. Richter's well-being. The court completely denies the request for guardianship." I had won. I had not only won the lawsuit, but also my freedom, my dignity, my right to live free from the abuse of those who supposedly loved me. When we left the courthouse, I saw Max and Lena talking angrily with their lawyer. Lena gave me a look of pure hatred before she walked away. Max looked at me one last time, and for a second, I saw something that could have been regret, but it was already too late. That night, Ella Lehner organized a celebration at my house with all our friends. We toasted to justice, to freedom, to the sisterhood of strong women who support each other. Renata, Alfreda told me, "Today, you didn't just win a trial. You won back your life." She was right. For the first time in years, the future was completely mine. I could travel. I could love. I could create. I could live without fear, without guilt, without manipulation. 3 months later, I sold my house and moved to a beautiful apartment near the city center. I donated half of my money to organizations that protect the elderly from family abuse. With the other half, I began to live the life I had always wanted. I traveled through Europe, took art classes, and joined volunteer groups. I never heard from Max and Lena again. I heard from others that they had to move to a smaller apartment and that Lena had found a job for the first time in years. Perhaps the adversity would teach them what my generosity never could. The value of honest work and independence. Some nights when I look at the stars from my new balcony, I think about the woman I was a year ago, fearful, manipulated, believing I had to buy love. That woman is dead. And in her place, someone has been born who has understood a fundamental truth. True love never has a price, and freedom is never too expensive. My name is Renedy. I am 72 years old, and I have finally learned that the most important person I have to love and protect is myself. If you liked my story, you can support me by making a donation so I can write more stories. Thank you in advance. And you, what would you do in this person's place? I would love to hear your opinion, so please share it with me in the comments. I'm always curious about what you all think, and also write me where you heard this story. For more life stories like this, like the video and subscribe to my channel. There are many other stories waiting for you. With heartfelt greetings. Until next time, M.